Right, well, welcome again to our voting information and action session. Not only will we be talking about how to really vote confidently in Texas, but also what you can do to help other Texas voters and make sure that we're spreading the word about voting from abroad. So just a little bit of background. We are all something known as UOCAVA voters. And if you've never heard that term before, the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act was the federal legislation that actually gives us the right to vote even when we are living outside of the country. And the request that we fill out is called the Federal Postcard Application. And it's really important that when you're requesting your ballot that you use the FPCA and not the ABBM, which is the absentee ballot by mail. That's the in-state absentee ballot request, and it does not give you the same protections. And so we want to make sure that everyone is using the FPCA. And Texas calls us FPCA voters. So we have an FPCA tracker. And so that kind of terminology comes up a lot. And that's this federal postcard application, which at one point in time was actually a postcard. Now it's not. That serves as both your ballot request and your registration. And for Texas, this is important. And we'll look at this a little bit later, but it's quite likely that you had been deregistered or taken off of the registration at some point in time, depending on how you filled out your FPCA. We're also guaranteed electronic ballot delivery if you select that you want to get your ballot by email or online on the FPCA, really important so that you don't get any postal mail delays. The other thing that we get with UOCAVA is 45 days prior to the election, we're guaranteed to have our ballot. So that is coming up soon. That is this coming Saturday, the 21st. If you do not have your ballot by that day, check your spam folders and everything. But if it's not there, please reach out immediately to your county clerk, and they'll probably still be there on that day, and just see what's going on and or get in touch with us so that we can help you. The other big difference between the ABBM and the FPCA is that you're eligible for all elections in that calendar year. And you're also allowed to fill out a backup ballot called the Federal Write-in Absentee Ballot, or a FWAB. And we'll talk a little bit more about why you might want to use that later. But it's not a second ballot. It's just a backup ballot, and it's only counted if your regular ballot doesn't return. Get there on time, and we do get an extra 6 days to get our ballots back. They do have to be postmarked by election day, but we have this little bit of a buffer at least in case your ballot gets hung up somewhere along the way. So this is what our FPCA looks like when it's all filled out. And we recommend that you fill out the FPCA at votefromabroad.org. There are a couple of reasons for that, and I'll get to that in a minute. But it's online. You can fill everything out and then download and print the form. And like I said, it serves as both registration and ballot request, and it is valid for a full calendar year. It expires December 31st. We'll talk a little bit more about some of these things in details. Just, as you're filling out forms, make sure that you're watching the month, day, year. I know sometimes for those of us who've lived abroad and are used to having the month and the day reversed, and checking, make sure that sometimes it asks you for today's date, sometimes it asks you for your birth date, and then just ensuring that everything is filled out completely, because they will not accept your form if it isn't. So you have, and vote from abroad is really good to tell you when it's your overseas address or when it's your in-state address. And so that's another good reason to use that form. If you do not have a Texas driver's license or a social security number, it can be more difficult to register. We did recently have a voter where the county they asked permission from the Secretary of State's office to register a voter who didn't have a social security number, and they allowed her to use their passport. But that is more of an exception than a rule. So if you've run into anything like that, if you don't happen to have a social security number, please get in touch with us, and we will do what we can to help you with that. And then the ever important wedding signature, but we'll get to that in a second too. When you go in to vote from abroad, you select the state, and then you're going to put in your name, your email address, your current address, your voting address, and that is the street address of the last place that you lived in the United States. It does not matter how long you have lived abroad. It doesn't matter if that is a parking lot now or a Whataburger. It's still the address that you use to vote. If doesn't matter if any of your family still lives there, that's okay. That is your residence. It is also possible if you have close ties to another place that you can change your voting residence, but you do not have to. That's something that I'm happy to talk to you about individually if you have questions, but just know that it doesn't matter 40, 50 years ago, that's your voting address. And once again, here is where you can select to have your ballot sent to you by email, and we do encourage that if you have access to a printer. One of the most frequent questions that we get is around intent to return. And when you see these boxes as you're filling out the FPCA, it seems quite innocuous, but it has massive consequences, including being disenfranchised from being able to vote. So if you're a non-military, if you're a civilian and you choose that you intend to return, that is going to kind of give you full access. You're going to get all of the elections, federal elections, state and local elections. And this is a really big difference. You will be added to the permanent voter rolls. That means if you go into the regular Texas government system to check for your registration, you're in there. Even though I have noticed that there are 3 different ways to log into that, and they don't always work. I often have to use my driver's license to be able to see that I'm in the system, even though I know that I'm permanently registered. So don't panic. I think that especially the one where it's your name and your county, I can never get that to work, even though I know I'm in the system. So, and then you will, at some point during the year, you'll get a small card in the mail that's your voter registration card. If, however, you say that your return is uncertain, not only will your ballot include federal races and nothing else, which are still very important this year. Obviously, you'll have the presidential race, you'll have the Senate race, you'll have your congressional district, and there are at least a handful of toss-up districts in Texas. But one of the big differences, if you say that your return is uncertain, is that you are not ever put onto the permanent voter rolls. You are given a temporary registration. It is a separate list. And when your FPCA expires on December 31st, you are removed from the rolls altogether. And it is as if you never existed. So we have a lot of people saying that they were purged. And while I would admit it is technically being purged, this is just Texas law. So with the category my return is uncertain, you will never be put onto the permanent voter rolls, and you will be removed at the end of the calendar year. And then even more critical is this final category of what we call never resideds, people born overseas to US citizen parents who have never actually lived in the United States. If you choose that box on the FPCA, your application will be rejected immediately. So we at Vote From Abroad, we follow the lead of the Federal Voting Assistance Program. And if you go to FVAP to fill out the form, they also have a kind of a click through pages where you can fill them out. It does not offer this category because these are 3 categories that were made for all 50 states to use. The FPCA is, used regardless of where you live in the United States. And Texas is one of only 14 states who has this never resided rule. It was something that was unfortunately left out of the federal legislation and left to the states to decide how they would, whether or not they would give people who fall into this category the right to vote. And unfortunately, there still are 14 states who have not amended this. So if this applies to you or to one of your children, please set up a time to chat with me and we can talk about what to do. Like I said, we follow the lead of the FBAP. We do not offer the choice of I never lived in the US when you fill out the form, and only either I intend to return or my return is uncertain. So happy to just chat to you about that and make sure that no one is being disenfranchised.
Jennifer, can I
Yeah.
make one point
Mhm.
about the intend to return? It's my understanding that you do not have to have a fixed plan to return.
Yes.
And even if you're just going to go to visit, it's not asking you if you intend to return and live there.
That's correct. There is actually no description anywhere in the election code what that intent is. It doesn't give a set time. It doesn't say how long you have to stay in the state. And we had Adrian Fontes from Arizona, who's now the Secretary of State of Arizona. Arizona is another state where you don't get the full ballot unless you intend to return. And obviously, important. His election was a down ballot, one of these state elections. And he came and spoke to us and said, if you could find a little bit of intent in your heart to return to the state so that you could vote that full ballot, there are many, many important state elections, including this year, the state Supreme Court, um, which has made some very, very radical decisions and that are affecting people's lives. And so, if you can find a little bit of intent in your heart, you are also able to send in a new FPCA at any time in the year. So if, you see this and realize, okay, perhaps I do intend to return at some point in the future, then you are welcome to send in a new FPCA and update your intent. So that can change at any time, and you can send in a new form at any time in the year as well. Thanks. That was a very good point. All right. One of our other major issues that we have in Texas is this business of the wet ink signature. Up until recently, we had a service on Vote from Abroad where you could sign a piece of paper and have that signature uploaded onto the FPCA. It was still a wet ink signature. It was just a photo of your signature. But we have had to turn that service off. And now everyone who requests their ballot will have to print the form, fill it out, print it, and then sign the form. Then you can still send your FPCA in via email. You just need to take a picture of it with your phone or you can scan it. But it has to have that wet ink signature. And it will be rejected if you do not have the wet ink signature. And the reason why this is so important is that when your county clerk receives your FPCA, if you've emailed it to them, they'll print out a copy of it and that goes into a file folder. And when your ballot arrives, they take your signature sheet and they compare the signature on the signature sheet to the signature on your FPCA. And Texas doesn't currently have a well advertised process to cure signatures, to correct signatures that seem to have had a mismatch. And we've not had any communication as to how you can do that from abroad. I've in fact not heard of any voters being contacted to be able to do that from abroad because I think you actually have to go in and do it in person. So you really need to make sure that your signatures match. So keep a copy of your form, keep that copy after you've taken a picture and sent it in, and just when you sign your ballot, make sure that you're using the same, or when you sign your signature sheet that goes back with your ballot, make sure you're using the same signature because we don't want anyone's vote not to count because someone has decided that that's not your signature, that they don't match. So
Jennifer, we didn't know about the wet signature thing until very, very recently. So at our voter registration events in Mexico, we've just been doing Texas the normal way. Are all those people not going to get ballots and they've been rejected and no one's told them? Should
so
they be contacting
up
Texas?
up to this point, there have it was only so it's been turned off for Bexar County for a long time. And just recently, we started having issues with Travis County. And then we were asked specifically by the Secretary of State's office to disable the service. So, as far as we know, anyone who has submitted their FPCA and has had it accepted, that they're fine, that they're registered. If you're on this call and you would feel more comfortable if you use the photo upload and you would feel more comfortable sending in a form that you signed and printed, you can do that. You can always send in a new FPCA. But this was really more about Travis County had begun uh, denying people's registration and making them print and sign the form and send in another FPCA to them. And now, like I said, we've just been asked to turn it off completely. So I
Okay,
think
so people who, excuse me, so people who did file their FPCA or that we filed, helped them file it from other counties previously should be okay? Or
yes.
should they check because no one would let them know if they were rejected, or would they get a
I
rejection?
mean, we always recommend that people check to make sure that their FPCA was accepted. Some counties are very good about notifying voters. If they are rejecting the FPCA, they're supposed to actually notify the voters, but I don't think that that always happens. So I would just definitely in the messaging to Texas voters that they should always make sure their FPCA was accepted. And I can show you in a minute in the FPCA tracker that they can look there to see, or they can just contact their county clerk directly. Um, it's very new territory, and this just happened a couple of days ago. And so yeah, we were all taken by surprise by it because it's wedding signature. That I mean, even if you're taking a photo and it's up being uploaded, it's still, that's we've known all along you cannot have an electronic signature. That's different. You're not signing with a keypad, you're not, using a mouse to do your signature. It is a photo of your ink signature. So we'll be working after the election is over to see if we can get this resolved. But for the moment, like I said, we've had to turn it off. But everyone should be okay as long as they're registered and everything has gone through. It shouldn't be a problem. But if a voter would feel more comfortable sending in a new form that they had signed, that also wouldn't hurt. But I don't think that to go back and have everybody resubmit their forms at this point who used the photo upload, I don't think that that would be necessary.
Right.
So, thank you. All right. Um, and this is what I was talking about. This is why the signature is so important, is because they do actually have like committees of people who go through and verify signature matches. And so you just want to make sure that you've signed the same way you did on your form, and you can email your FPCA to the county clerk, so you don't have to worry about postal mailing it in. We have had a few counties this year who are maybe they don't have a lot of FPCA voters and they're confusing the absentee ballot by mail rule with the FPCA, and they've been asking people to send in a hard copy of their FPCA. That is not the law. And so if your county starts asking for a hard copy of your FPCA, please reach out to us so that we can remind them of the election code and that they can get them straightened out, because we've had that come up a couple of times. And I think it's just, they deal with, some counties have more overseas voters than others, and there has been a lot of turnover the last few years. It's not been easy to work in these election offices, and of course, in a presidential year, they're hiring a lot of temporary workers, and so people who aren't necessarily familiar with the code. So if you run into anything like that that just doesn't seem quite right, let us know, and we're happy to remind the counties of the correct election code and make sure that everything is above board. So there is the FPCA ballot tracker, which it's pretty easy to find if you just Google Texas FPCA ballot tracker, and I'll send out the slides afterwards so that you've got the ink for it. It will show kind of chronologically, this is me for the year. So when my FPCA was first accepted, and then it kind of will go through every time you get in. So here was my primary ballot, showing when everything was sent out, and that then when they mailed out my ballot, when my ballot made it back, And so you can see if your FPCA was accepted. This is not always up to date. There can be a lag of sometimes weeks even. So if it shows that your ballot was accepted, you're good to go. If you're like checking it and your ballot hasn't, it doesn't show yet that your ballot has been accepted, it doesn't necessarily mean that your ballot isn't already there. It just means that your county hasn't updated the system yet. So you might want to reach out directly to your county clerk. They will have the most up-to-date information. It's and we have, I feel like this year it's been in better shape, but in the past it's also like had times where you would go in and you'd just not be there at all. So don't panic if for some reason this isn't showing that your ballot is back or that all of a sudden you're not in the system. It is not a particularly reliable source, but if it does say your ballot's there, your ballot's there. At least there's that, one good piece of information. But so talk to your clerk directly if it's not showing up here. Um, so this Saturday, you will get your ballot by email if you requested it to come by email. If you didn't request that your ballot be sent by email, you can update your FPCA and ask for it to come by email. Check your spam folder, junk mail folder, just to be sure that it hasn't gone there. But I know my county is very good about sending it with like high importance so that it actually goes into my inbox. This was my subject line for the last ballots, send it as an official ballot. So looking for something with a .gov address or from your county. If it hasn't come in by the end of business on Saturday, or kind of that last hour, like by 4 p.m. Texas time, I would suggest that you go ahead and contact your county clerk, and just see what's going on. They're going to be working late getting them out because they have to meet that federal deadline. And if you can't get a hold of them, write to us for help. They will, especially in the larger counties, they will be there on Saturday working to get those ballots out. Um, and then sometimes you'll get a link. This varies by county to download the PDF. Just follow the instructions to access your ballot that your county clerk sends. This is just my particular county. One of the most difficult things about Texas is with our 254 counties that every county does things differently. It is highly frustrating when you're trying to make sure that people have similar information, but there are certain things that are within the election code, and those are the things that matter. And I'll go through a couple of those now, just because those are the ones that if you don't do it, then your ballot won't count. But most things are just administrative and they are not significant. So when you get your ballot package, just open your instructions and the ballot. And if your ballot looks like this was a Travis County ballot from a couple of years ago, you're going to probably wonder how you print that out onto paper that is, normal sized paper. So what you can do is print it out using fit to paper. And as long as everything shows up, especially these black marks around the edge, they also need to show up. Then even if it's small, it doesn't matter as long as everything is on there. You can reduce the size. So you're going to need to print out your ballot and you need to print out the signature sheet. And then if your county clerk sends you templates for the envelopes, that looks something like this. Then you can print those out as well. And then you're going to vote your ballot. And let me see. Yeah, make sure that you use a pen, blue or black ink, and your ballot goes into a privacy envelope. So you want to put your ballot into just a plain white envelope. So stop sharing for just a second so you can see. So taking an old ballot here. So I printed out my ballot, making sure that the codes on the side that they show up. And mine is not as long as some of these others. There's an extra page. I printed it too, voted everything in blue or black ink. They are going to take the ballot that you send in. If you have received your ballot by email, they're going to take that ballot and someone will transfer your votes onto an official ballot that can be sent through the machines. So as long as it's legible, that you're fine. And that's done in a commission where is a balance of Republicans and Democrats, and there's always someone observing so that your votes get transferred onto an official ballot. And then you can just fold that up and put it into the secrecy envelope. And then you're going to seal that secrecy envelope, and you don't put anything else in there. You don't write anything on it. You just stick your ballot in there and seal it up. It doesn't matter what size envelope you're using for this, but this just protects the privacy of your ballot. And then most counties will send out some kind of a template for you to use to return your ballot. So this is what mine looks like. There have been some where you're supposed to wrap it around the envelope. You do not have to wrap it around the envelope. That is just, you can cut it. I recommend either gluing with a glue stick, or I have used just tape. Do not use staples, please, because that can get caught in the voting machines, but tape is fine. And that's just the front. Mine is already filled out. It's got my county clerk's address on there. And then when I go to send it, before I do that, I would put my return address on there. The thing that matters, and this is one of those kind of make or breaks, is that the flap on the back of this return envelope needs a signature. So if you didn't get any kind of a template, you can seal this flap and sign over it. That's fine. I get a template from my county clerk that even has my name on it and the date of the election. And this is basically what the back of the ballot envelope that they would send you if you asked for it by postal mail would look like. And you sign it there. And then I tape mine over top of this flap, just so that the signature is over the flap. That's all that really matters. They want to make sure that you were the one who voted the ballot. You were the one who put it into to the envelope, that you did all of that, and you were the last person to touch it after you sealed the envelope and you sign it. There is one other thing that has to go in here, and I'm going to go back to the slides just so that you can see what that looks like. Actually, I'm going to go back to the slides. You need to, with your ballot package, you're going to get a signature sheet. And this is the PDF that comes with my instructions, and you can fill it out in a PDF reader. When you request your ballot, you've either said that you used your social security number or your driver's license. Whichever one of those you used, that is what you need to put on here. This was one of the things that came up in SB1, and why it's really important that you know. And that's why it's really also super important that you keep your FPCA, because you can see, okay, I used my social security number, going to fill in the last 4 digits of my social security number. The address here is your overseas voting address. It's very confusing because it doesn't say country. You would think it needed to say country. It does not. So you can put the country where it says state if you want. That's so. And then when you go to, it used to say country on there, which was what's much clearer as to their intent. But this is your voting address where you live abroad. And then you can go down, you can fill into the date that you're sending it back. You'll need to print this form and sign it. If you do not have this form, your ballot will be rejected. This is the paper that they compare your FPCA to. So there are a couple of places, if you don't have these 2 signatures, that it's bad news. So those are the 2 places: on the envelope over the flap, and here on the signature sheet. You must have both of those in order to get your ballot counted.
Jennifer, can I make a point?
Yes.
It's my understanding that if you're in a county that sends out 2 pages,
Mm-hmm.
even if the second page has no offices on it to vote in, you still have to send that blank page back with your ballot.
Yes, I would print everything that they send you that's marked as ballot, like that, like mine had like extra page included without any races, definitely. Print that and send it back. Yeah. I don't know exactly why they do that, but yeah, I would just anything that they send you that says ballot on it, print it out and send it back. Yeah. Very good point. All right, so there's our privacy. We've got this in our voting guide. If you're not sure when you to go back, just making sure that you're filling everything out and that you're matching the ID. Um, and you can also reduce this to print. Just make sure that everything is on there and that it's your overseas address.
Jennifer, if the voter doesn't remember what ID they used when they filled in the FPCA, because I know we're going to get voters wanting us to help return the text ballot who aren't going to remember that. Would it
Yeah,
be okay if on the signature sheet they put in both the driver's license and the social security number just to be
that's
sure?
fine. That's fine. If you
Okay,
have both and you want to put both on there, that's okay. That's not going to disqualify you. What would disqualify you is if you used your social security number and here you only put your driver's license or vice versa.
exactly. So if you can't remember which, safer to do
Do both.
both. They won't disqualify you for that. And then do both the ballot and the signature sheet go into the same privacy envelope?
No, and I've got one more.
Okay, sorry, I may have
Yeah,
gotten ahead of
yeah,
you.
no, all good, all good. So once you filled out that signature sheet, there's a little witness section on there. If we do not need witness, it's not witness, it's an assistant. If you don't need any assistance, you just ignore that section altogether. And just here I said, make sure that signature matches your FPCA. Then you're going to take the sealed privacy envelope and put it into your outer carrier envelope. And then you're going to put the signature sheet in the outer carrier envelope as well. So you don't want to have any kind of identifying marks or anything that identifies you when it comes to your ballot. That's why the privacy envelope just goes in as it is with no name, no anything on it. And then the signature sheet goes in separately. And then once you've got those two things inside your outer carrier envelope, you can seal that up. You can use a bigger envelope. It doesn't matter what size envelope you use. And like I said, you do not have to use this particular template, but they do expect a signature over the back flap. If you have a template, I would go ahead and use it just because it's easier. And like I said, I make sure you sign that and then put this over the seal of the back of your envelope.
That's the back of your carrier envelope?
The back of the carrier envelope. So once whatever you're using for this outer envelope, seal it, and then I put mine over the flap and tape it over the flap, and it's got my signature there. And if
If
you
that
don't,
goes, sorry, if
sorry,
that goes through the mail, doesn't that piece of paper sometimes fall off or get pulled
um,
off? It seems very
I have
vulnerable.
it does, but I mean, I've always had good luck using just sellotape and I haven't had any trouble with it. I just try to make sure that it's, not hanging over the edges, if you can get it as flat as possible, so that it doesn't get stuck. But you can also use glue, but I find that glue is I think tape is a better solution just because it's flat and it's all sealed. So I would recommend using tape. But
Question.
yeah, go for it.
Sorry. Is the signature supposed to cross over the edges of the flap?
If you don't use the template, I would just close this and sign directly over the seal. If you've got the template, it doesn't have to, it's just to show that I put this on there after the envelope was closed. So I mean, you could turn it around the other way. I don't think the signature, if you're using the template, doesn't have to be precisely over the seal. I mean, it's made for an envelope that goes sideways. As long as this template itself is over the seal, then you're fine. So it's a, and like I said, this is another one of those cases where not everybody gets the same template. Everybody's looks different. So if you just want to, you know, if you want me to like help you with it or look at it once you get your ballot, just send me an email and I'm happy to hop on a call with you just to make sure. But as long as either you sign it directly if you didn't get any kind of a template, or you just tape that template over the envelope, you're good to go. So, you know, I probably would put mine going this way just since that's where the seal is. But yeah, one of those very fiddly little things. I remember spending 6 hours on the phone with a voter in 2020 talking about signatures and envelopes and everything. That's why we made the guide and made sure that everybody had all the instructions for it. But I'm happy to help anybody with this, or some of our other Texas volunteers can walk you through this, because we just want to make sure, you know, this is one of the things, especially the signature sheet, that is, you have to have it. It's not optional. So we want to make sure it's done correctly. All right, and this is just those templates. This is, like I said, this is what mine looks like. Not everyone's looks like this, and some counties don't send them out at all. So would be so easy if they just all did. And there's, you can see where you need to sign. If you've got that. The other option, if your county doesn't send you a template, FVAP has a template that you can use, and I will pop that link in the chat when we're done, just so that you can see that, or you can just go to FVAP and in their page, look for return envelope. And they've also got templates that you can use. Just be sure to sign over that seal. All right. Then you want to get it back as soon as humanly possible. So I would suggest get your ballot on Saturday. If you get it early enough, go ahead and get it in the mail on Saturday too, because we are noticing delays in the US of weeks, occasionally even. So even if you're using the embassy, the diplomatic pouch, be sure to check the return times, and you want to do that as soon as possible, because once it gets back into the US, they often go to Washington. It's got to go all the way from Washington to Texas, and there are lots of distribution points within the US where mail is getting delayed. So give yourself as much time as possible. We recommend, if you're using just regular mail, that you do not use registered mail, because that requires a signature. And if there's no one there to sign for it when it's delivered, it'll get sent back. We really don't want that to happen. You can, of course, track it, but please don't use anything that requires someone to have to sign for it. Like I said, it has to be postmarked by the day of the election and received no later than 6 days after the election. If you want to use a private courier service, such as, FedEx, DHL, any of those, you can, and families can share an envelope if you vote at the same address. What you're going to do, though, is go through the process, and everybody votes their ballot and puts everything into this outer envelope, carrier envelope, and then you use the courier envelope like a mailbox. So everything is completed, everything is signed and sealed, and then they go into this courier envelope together, just like you would walk downtown and give it to your local mail people.
It's an important point, though, that the local election office have a street address and not a PO box, because the courier service won't deliver to a PO box. So sometimes we have to check that in advance.
Yeah. And oftentimes they'll have it listed on the county website, but sometimes you just have to write to them and ask them. There have been a few counties where it wasn't listed on their website, but yeah, you can't just use the PO box. It should all be so easy, but it's not. If you are checking the tracker and your ballot's not coming up and it hasn't made it back yet, and you contact your county clerk and they haven't received your ballot and you're getting a little nervous, you can then vote a backup ballot, the federal write-in absentee ballot, and send it in as well and use a courier. So if you're concerned that your ballot's not going to make it back in time, you have to do this prior to election day. And like I said, you go to the FVAP website, and there's a section where it will help you fill out the FWAB, this backup ballot. It is not voting twice. If your general election ballot is received, that's what they're going to use. And if not, they'll go to your backup ballot. Please just reach out if you have any questions about that. If you are seeing that your ballot hasn't made it and you're nervous that it's not going to get there on time, you are welcome then to send in a backup ballot. And we can help you with that process. It's pretty straightforward, and everything is online where you can fill it out. Basically, you're filling out the FPCA questions again, and then it gives you a section where you can fill in the candidates that you're voting for. All right, and here we have the tracker, and it will show if your ballot was received and accepted, two separate categories that come up there. And you just want to make sure that it has been both received and accepted. So oftentimes you'll get this received before the election, and the accepted then will show up after the election because they don't go through and count them until afterwards. So don't worry if it hasn't been accepted just yet, as long as it's been received. And like I said, if it might already be there and it just hasn't been entered into the system, depending on your county and how often they're putting that information into the system. So your clerk is always the most up-to-date source. All right. We have a whole team of voter assistants and voter protection volunteers to help with the issues that inevitably come up, especially in a state like Texas. So anytime you have a question, please reach out. You can write to voter help at democratsabroad.org. We have regular Zoom rooms for voter assistance. Those, if you go to vote from abroad, at the top of the page, there is a link to the Zoom rooms, and they're happening almost every day this week and after ballots come out, just because yeah, this is our voting time now. This is our election day. And we want to make sure everyone is really gets the assistance that they need in a timely manner. We have a candidate page with information on it, and including some links to researching the down ballot races, particularly that state Supreme Court race. If you have nonpartisan elections on your ballot, I would highly recommend ActiVote. And like I'll send these slides around so you'll have the links. And what you can do there is you can answer some questions about your stance on particular issues. And then it will show you on the grid where you are in relation to candidates. They've sent out questionnaires to candidates all across the country and also down to even the school board level. So if that candidate answered the survey questions, then you can see, okay, they are in a very different belief system than I am, and you can kind of judge who you would like to vote for by that, even if it doesn't identify them as having a particular party. You can also write to us at tx@democratsabroad.org, particularly with, kind of nitty-gritty Texas things, but our volunteers are reachable here through the voter help at democratsabroad.org. And then we really want to make sure that we're also getting others ready to vote and spreading the word about voting from abroad. We had the best turnout ever of overseas voters in 2020, and we did not even make it to 8% of the estimated US citizens living abroad who cast a ballot. So there's so many people out there who don't know that they can vote. Dual citizens, students studying abroad, people who've lived abroad for a long time don't realize that they still have the right to vote. So anybody you know who's a US citizen, please send them to vote from abroad and get them set to vote. Help your friends and family to register, encourage them to join Democrats Abroad just so that they can stay updated and engaged. We'd love for you to volunteer with our team here at Texans Abroad. There's just, Texas is always going to be one of those states that needs lots of eyes on it. You can spread the word back home about voting from abroad, because it's just very few people realize that it's a thing. So talk to your friends and family. If you're in any groups back home, maybe online that are political related, issue related, just dropping a post in there saying, hey, did you know that you could vote from abroad? Spread the word to your friends and family. Send them to votefromabroad.org. It's that simple. If you have newsletters that you have access to, we have a one pager that you can share, and just all over social media, we encourage you to spread the word about voting from abroad, because there are so many people out there who just don't know how or don't know that they can, and we got to get the word out to them. If you are on social media and you engage with influencers or candidates, you can also ask them to share messaging about voting from abroad, or you can post on their accounts. We do have a Facebook group that's a great community to have discussions, and a lot of this, a lot of these questions have come up there throughout the year, and we're able to, answer those questions quickly. And so we would just, if you want, I can post the link to that, and I'll give you a few links in the follow-up email for all of this, so that you don't have to worry about hunting for it or saving the chat. And of course, the work that we do, we're calling all of our Texas members right now and making sure that they have good information. We're going to call them again after ballots come out to make sure they know how to get their ballots back. And so that all costs money, and we would appreciate if you feel moved to do so, to donate a little bit to the cost, so that we can make more calls, get out more information, and just have all of the services ready to be able to help people vote.